This was um the third time um refreshing to come back. So I'm kind of a little expecting it to cut out again like last time I did once and come back. It's I don't know, I guess like this. So that may happen. I'm sorry if it does, but I'll come right back. So um I sorry. Huh, um just sad today. Like I was going to hang some things last night, but I couldn't find my hammer until like right before I was going to bed. I found my hammer. I did a little hammer this morning on a chair, like reaching up, but it was like I didn't have the energy to clear a path to like hammer again, I guess. So I thought, you know what? I wanted to watch something on TV and relax. Um, and at first I was going to watch The White Lotus. Just, a lot of people are watching it, talking about it. And as I was falling asleep last night, a video had come up talking about how um that season and it was so popular. And I didn't want to spoil because I was like, you know what? I should watch that tomorrow. And I went to put it on, and when you go on like HBO or one of those like apps, and there's like little bit of a synopsis or like a blurb, and it just said like um something of people like in this series by so and so, they're at a resort. And that's the strangest thing because every time for a while now I see something of people going on vacation, I always say to myself, um, I've been invited on vacation. And I didn't really realize that until today. And I was putting that on, and it was like a horror movie. Like realizing that I actually never have been invited on a vacation, really. And I kind of went back to how when that began, and I think it just must have meant like a lot to me. Oh, hey, Darth. I haven't seen you in a while. Um, and like when I was a kid, my mom went to Costa Rica with her boyfriend, fiance, and my little sister, and they didn't take me. He, his brother's kids, they'd always like go on vacations and talk about that. And I think for some reason, me really believing that I was invited on a vacation, um, it must ha it's so embarrassing to say this, but it must have, like, really meant a lot to me, and I think from that point, I kind of changed how I thought about myself, um, that I was somebody worthy of going on a vacation, like my sister and other people, and I was kinda, like, didn't wanna let go of that. It was strange. I was just like No, I don't wanna lose this one. I don't wanna let go of this one. But it's like, you can't lose what you never had. And man, like, my self-esteem really tanked from there. Like, cause I couldn't piece together, like, how much of my self-pride started then. Like, how much of my feeling of, like, worthiness that I really thought that was real. Um, and having to give that up came with having to give up, like, a lot. It was just like, um, I was thinking yesterday about some, like, painful things, from my past, and so I was just, like, a vulnerable spot already. And, like, with the loss of my dog, thinking about what I still had, what I still had to be happy about, and so, like, I'm just in a confused place, I guess, of, like, what to think about, like, myself, and, um, cause like, I put, like, a lot of meaning on that, like, person. This was years ago, like, they don't even write me, like, and I check, they don't write me, so, um, and so I still haven't determined not determined, I still haven't calculated how much, um, this is gonna take from, my own self-appraisal. That sucks. It just sucks. But yeah, I've never genuinely I can't even say it. It's I've never genuinely been invited on a vacation. Um, and I've said that to myself a lot, that I have. Like every time there's like an island or a show, like, oh, I've been invited. I haven't. Maybe I'm just, like, I'm very vulnerable right now with the loss of my dog and thinking of things of my past and what I have left. And so I couldn't watch the show. I think people will say things to me out of charity, like a charity statement, so that for a minute I can feel good enough. But when it's gone, it actually hurts more than if it wasn't said at all, because it's like sort of twisted up in my mind of what I'm really worth. Like I can hear like my mom's voice, like, you idiot, you idiot. Like, yeah, yeah. Um, so I didn't think I could take watching it, so I decided to watch that Pee Wee Herman documentary. It's two parts, so I actually haven't finished because I'm like, "Oh, sorry," because they're almost 2 hours each. Um, s but there's not much left in the second part, and I hadn't seen any of his shows, his, like, movies or whatever, um, but just the way he interviews, the way he, like, his jokes and in the show, or I'm sorry, well, it's sort of a show 'cause they call it episodes, but the documentary, is quite funny, so, um so far, I'll give it a good rating because from what I've seen, it's very fascinating. Um, anyway, oh, those cramps. I have this black dress, but these are I don't know how sure these are. They're kind of thicker. They're knit. So just in case I didn't want to like do a flash at least right at the beginning and get booted. So um all right. So where we left off, I know I was at a chapter not finished. The trader had come back to the island, or not really back. He came to Australia um after being back around the people that he backstabbed, and they pieced it together. And so what's happening now, I guess he got like a plum job in the government or whatever. Um and they're pretty pissed off. So let's see where it goes from there. when it's um when it's in the middle of a chapter, then I've got to find the place. I don't like put a mark, so oh, thank you guys. Do you know what I was looking for last night? I just found as I was kind of cleaning up right before the show, so found it right here. In the last months of 1850, the hermit on the lake was a clatter of joy. Yes, Mar agonized over the troubles that had befallen his mates, and he eagerly awaited news of his tortured homeland, a distant signal to telegraph away for his tomorrows. But now he was preoccupied. He couldn't get enough of Catherine Bennett. For the first time since he'd been shipped to the penal colony, he seemed to be lifting the blanket of despair over his fate. The courtship was no casual affair. Marr threw himself all in, writing notes in his best hand, singing to the governess in his most beautiful tones, tossing off bits of verse as if the words were gold dust. The dazzle of the blue eyes, the turn of phrase, the dimpled smile, the full force of his physical charisma was unleashed on his Benny. Mark designed his days around her. He still went through the motions of farming, but his heart was not into turnips and carrots. By the late Tasmanian spring, his deadened soul and the somn- somnambulism of the long walks in the woods were a thing of the past. Catherine had renewed the proud and generous nature that was sinking coldly and dismally into a stupid and sensual stagnation. He told one exile, "Glory, glory be to heaven, I am myself again." But his friends saw only disaster. For one, something more than his heart was throbbing. Mar was full of lust in a land with very few acceptable single women. To his mates, it was understandable that a man in his prime could not bear sensual stagnation. Still, couldn't he find someone more fitting of his class? Mitchell, Smith, O'Brien, Martin, all may have hated Britain for its persecution of Ireland, but they adopted an English view of one's proper place. A man of wealth, a gentleman, a graduate of Stonyhurst, did not take up with a felon's daughter. Mar had arranged a few surreptitious introductions of the beauty of Ross to his fellow exiles. Smith O'Brien was impressed by her looks and little else. "She is in person and manner very pleasing," he wrote in his journal, "but in a worldly point of view, the connection cannot be seen as advantageous to him." Martin was more blunt. "God help the poor fellow," he wrote a friend. I fear, one of the finest fellows that ever lived is in great danger of rushing headfirst and with eyes open to the very pit of destruction." What did this country governess, this girl, know of history and literature, of politics and art? How could she ever hold up her end of conversation with the man described as the greatest orator of his generation? As for Mitchell, he was astonished, he said, that his friend would try to live the rest of his days with someone lacking a hint of sophistication. But Marr could not be stopped. Around Christmas he proposed. He was deeply hurt that his friends thought he was marrying beneath his standing. He couldn't convince them otherwise. "I know full well," he wrote O'Doherty in the neighboring prison district, "that I shall not elevate myself by the connection on which I have passionately and proudly set my heart. Still, for him, love trumped class. Couldn't they see that? The trappings of position, material goods, family name, damn it all. He was a felon serving a life sentence in a faraway penal colony. Let the world pursue its own course and seek enjoyment, wealth, grandeur through the glare of gold and old family plate, amid the emblazonry of crests and shields." A date was set for Sunday, February 22nd, 1851. He circulated a note. No gloves, no cards, no cake, everything very quiet. No cake. The fuck? The simple ceremony took place at the home of Dr. Hall. Looking out at the guests, Mars spotted someone with familiar eyes, much of his face covered in a ragged beard, barely recognizable. Terence McManus, the wool broker from Liverpool, late to Young Ireland's cause, was the only man from their circle to attend the wedding. Wow, they really did not approve. His very appearance was a crime. He had been doing hard labor in a prison camp when word came that he was to be released from the chain gang, a reprieve made possible by a legal technicality. McManus promptly announced that he would no longer abide by the overall terms of his sentence and went into hiding. Police throughout Van Diemen's Land were searching for him. McManus wished the groom well. He said the island was no longer for him. He intended to escape. He had one small request of his friend to take care of his dog, a greyhound named Brian. Yes, yes, of course, the dog would join Benny and Thomas in exile at Lake Sorrel. Mar embraced him. They held a look, each wanting some of what the other had, a look that also meant farewell, see you in another world. New life, 1851, a farmer, a husband, maybe soon a father. The cottage at the lake shore took on Benny's touches. Warmer, softer, he sang for his wife instead of the habitus of the island's gum trees. He skipped like a 4-year-old. One visitor remarked. He worked his land with the convict Tom Egan, took Speranza out for long sails. No wind scared him. He tried to establish new records for the trip from the lake island to his cottage, getting down to 13 minutes. And that through a nasty squall, the home of Mr. and Miss Thomas Francis Omar would never be a cell. He built shelves, added a second writing desk. Despite the remoteness of my friends, as Mart told his unbending mate O'Doherty, he was happy. With regards to Benny, there she is, sitting up in an armchair, looking fresher and more beautiful than ever, in sparkling good spirits. Mar was dutiful, riding into Ross to get things for his bride, tending to her when she fell ill. She was sickly for a girl of 19, suffering from rheumatism, her joints swollen and painful, and often confined to bed. I wonder what causes that. To outsiders, Mar seemed the portrait of contented country squire. In that sense, he was exactly what the crown wanted, both gentleman and oblivion, without a hint of fight left in him. They neutered him. One of the greatest public speakers of his era now rarely even granted his dog an audience. A sunburnt man in a sailor's jacket stands in the stern, holding the tiller. Mitchell said of one visit with his newly arrived wife, Jenny. By his side, on a crimson cushion, sits a fair and graceful girl. That sunburnt fellow is Mar, and the girl, why, it's Mrs. Marr. It had been 3 years since Jenny Mitchell had seen Mar, and the antipodian air had done something for him. He is looking handsomer than he ever did in Ireland. Jenny found the young wife to be one of the beauties of this country, but like her husband, she didn't approve. In background, in mind, in spirit, Catherine was ordinary. It's a pity on the whole, between ourselves. Jenny clucked in one letter back to Ireland. I fear his father will be very wroth with him. Her husband, brutal in his sarcasm, was prescient about the fate of the couple. Why, it's almost like living. As it turned out, he knew Mar all too well. The spell of newlywed rapture could not last. The man was born for struggle on a grand stage, Mitchell believed, just as Mar could never be content sipping spirits in the old boys' club at Waterford, could never be a dandy of Dublin. He could not live a life of passive domesticity at Lake Sorrel. Certainly, Mar was trying to give up the big fight to turn a page, even as he acknowledged how difficult it was. I am compelled to a life of uselessness and can do little or nothing to realize the dream that gave light and music to my early years. Mar wrote a friend on the island. Without meaning or purpose, the days started to move slowly. Though he was master of a small house, it was a forced charade, mostly cosmetic. He was still in prison, his every move monitored, his every plan subject to second guessing and approval by the island's governor. He kept thinking about what the census of Ireland had revealed, the shedding of a nation, 1 in 4 gone by emigration or starvation. The former would never forget, the latter would never be forgotten. That burden of memory was never heavier. As the bliss dissipated, Mark grew tired of his leash, tired of his routine, tired of reporting himself every week to the authorities in Ross. There is there to take my bow before the magistrate of the police district, tired of being on the wrong side of the small town's gossip, tired of the laughable limitations of Britain lashed to this far domain. Ban flag flies here, Mar wrote Duffy. After barely half a year of married life, Mar was ready to chuck his domestic existence and take some risks again. How my heart beats and pants for a quick deliverance from this abominable captivity. Oh, you're planning an escape. When he got word of Balfi's treachery, he jumped at the chance for retaliation. The blather he had heard back in Dublin about their shared Clongowes connection, school and tradition, bound by Jesuit loyalty, and all that. To think of the midnight meetings where Balfi had been shoulder to shoulder with the young men sketching a free Ireland. Mar plotted his revenge, but the pen would have to come before the sword. Writing under the name of Virginius from the poems of Thomas Proper family, he argued, living under sentence, their children doomed by the stain. He was offended to see the cold stares directed at his lover, wife of a convict. I had not been 4 months married when I saw that she had to share the privations and indignities to which her husband himself was subject, he wrote. A prisoner myself, I had led another from the altar to share with me an odious captivity. This I could not bear. Hence I came to the determination of breaking loose from the trammels which bound me to that hateful soil. Catherine Amar was a free citizen. She could come and go as she pleased, anywhere in the British Empire. But there was a problem. Benny was pregnant. This only hardened Mar's resolve. No child of an Irish patriot would reside in the oppressor nation's confinement. Because of her fragility, Mar was convinced that Benny should not travel until the baby was born. He would get out first. The family would follow, traveling in style, with Mar's money. When they next saw each other, God willing, they would be new parents to a free-born Irish child. Coordinating an escape from a base in New York and with an elder Mar in Waterford was no easy thing. A letter sent at Christmas would not arrive in Ireland until April. A ship had to be in place at the right time. The captain paid off and sworn to secrecy. It could all go wrong so quickly. Witness the betrayal of a hired mariner In the Smith O'Brien debacle, following the McManus breakout, the governor had tightened his control of the state's prisoners. Although it was clear with the election results in Ben Diamond's land and a change in the political winds in England that transportation of convicts was headed for history's attic, Denison made life worse for those still tied to life sentences. Anyone trying to escape would be shot. Marr took up the challenge with relish. "Could you bring a gun?" he wrote O'Doherty in one of his last notes to a fellow exile. "I intend to go armed to the short collar, a brace of pistols, the rifle," and there was the odd code to which Marr adhered. He had given his word of honor, after all, that he would not flee, a word that meant something to Victorians of standing. A few days before the new year, he took Benny down to her family's home and said goodbye. The plan, when she got word of his whereabouts, she would travel first to Ireland to be with the elder Mar in Waterford. Then they would reunite in America. She should prepare to be separated from her husband for up to 2 years. Back at Lake Sorrel, Mars stocked up on provisions, dried food, hardtack, extra clothing. After spotting the fire lit by a supporting family, the signal that all parts of the escape plan were in place, he said goodbye to Egan. Enjoy the fruits of their labor. On the morning of January 3rd, 1852, Marr sent a note to the magistrate of his district for same-day delivery, the strange formal act of transition from gentleman's oblivion to gentleman's escape. "Sir, circumstances of recent occurrence urge upon me the necessity of resigning my ticket of leave, and consequently withdrawing my parole. I write this letter, therefore, respectfully to apprise you that after 12 o'clock tomorrow noon, I shall no longer consider myself bound by the obligation which that parole imposes. In the meantime, however, should you conceive it in your duty to take me into custody, I shall, as a matter of course, regard myself as wholly absolved from the restraint which my word of honor to your government at present inflicts. I have the honor to be, sir, with sincere respect, your obedient servant, Thomas Francis Marr." With those words, the exile hoped to never encounter the British Empire again as anything but an equal. Within minutes of receiving the note, the magistrate dispatched a heavily armed patrol up to Lake Sorrel. One of the constables, an Irishman, refused to go and was replaced. The order to police was explicit. If the convict resisted, they should kill him. Chapter 8, Flight. Mm, I don't understand that. The no, I'm sure there's setting up a plan, but it doesn't seem like the best course of action for an escape. When I was watching the show earlier, I got really itchy. Like in this, I'll show you some here, but mainly right here. Anyway, I'm just remembering now that I had taken a bunch of Benadryl. And maybe I got like a 30 minutes of rest or something in between or a shower, but um yeah, I think it's having an effect on me. It's okay if I sound sleepy. Um, that's all. And also, probably should eat. Let's let us read chapter 8. I don't know why I'd be flying. They don't have planes yet. Feels dry. I have some mint somewhere. They're supposed to be like calming mints, but I haven't tried them yet. Do you ever hear of those that begin with an N, I think? Cool. One last look, and quickly the books, companions through the loneliest months would have to stay. Same with the gifts of fellow convicts, the walking stick from O'Doherty, the letters of support, scented and unscented. He needed his cachet of food, a hat to shield his face, clothes, stuffed into a bag. He shut the cottage door and took the first step outward. His feet, his horse, and the wind to carry him with luck more than halfway around the world. To freedom. It was 7 o'clock on Saturday evening when friends on horseback arrived with news that constables were on their way to seize Mar. The Irishman and his co-conspirators, neighbors who had agreed to help, crept 300 yards away to a wooded hideout. He heard the approach of the police and waited, voice muffled in a crouch. Word came from one of his supporters. They are in your house. He sprang up and mounted his horse, moving into the dying light of a Tasmanian summer day, January 3rd, 1852. Now he revealed himself, rising in his stirrups, hat in hand, face visible. He gave the British Empire one shot at him. Now he would perform his gentleman's duty and be done with his captors. I am Omar, he shouted. Catch me if you can. The police had only that glance of a defiant equestrian, for he was off with his posse as soon as the last words left his mouth, done as a bull as the locals called it. They went into the bush without a shout. Ho! Followed by cheers. At a full gallop, they dashed along a path around the rim of Lake Sorrel. He knew this part of the island better than his pursuers, could ride it in the haze of dusk, knew the dips and turns, following a barely visible trail. They stopped at Cooper's hut. Mars friend was asleep. Startled, he came out with just a nightshirt on, asked who was calling and if there were women present. Marr identified himself. He paid the old shepherd for past kindnesses. All the times he'd opened his shack for a gathering of exiles. Goodbye, Cooper. I'm off. They raced upward through the western Tiers Mountains toward the coast in darkness, pushing the pace. At the hut of a shepherd named Job Sims, Mar dismounted and went inside. There he shaved off his mustache. He could count on support from many of the Irish, Welsh, and English convicts living in the wild north of the island and could have hid out there for weeks. But Mar was eager for open water and beyond. To get to the shore and a rendezvous 140 or so miles away as quickly as he could, even if it meant exhausting his mounts or risking accident. All night they moved across the island, cresting the tiers, down slope to the northeast coast. Sunday was hot, buggy, exhausting. Mark wrote a short summary of his escape for publication in a local newspaper and included the names of witnesses who could verify his account should someone challenge his word to prove he had acted honorably. After a change of horses, he pushed on in great haste, refusing to rest, not with guards in pursuit. The chill, the fright, the uncertainty of moving through Ireland 4 years earlier in the last days of the uprising came back to him. That Sunday morning, Governor Denison got word of Mar's escape. He cursed his name and accused him publicly of breaking his word. It was one way to hurt him, should he get away, solely the reputation of the great orator. The other way was to catch him, and if so, Denison had already planned a punishment. He announced that he would ship Mar to the hardest of the hard labor camps still in operation on the island, Port Arthur, its walls spattered with blood from the backs of men shredded with cat o' nine tails, its timber crews chained while felling trees, its isolation a punishment in itself. I will send him to Port Arthur, the governor announced, and make him a bottom sawyer under a very good top one. The implication of rape and work that would break or kill him was lost on no one. By Sunday evening, the escapee was in Westbury, north of Lake Sorrel. There were not many people in the region, but enough Irish settlers and paroled convicts that Marr did not have to hide. He found shelter for the night, a meal, and hearty encouragement to make it off the island. The next day, new volunteers offered to ride with him, following the Tamar River as it widened and spilled into the sea in a northern heave. His destination was Waterhouse Island in Bass Strait, the big sea lane separating mainland Australia from Van Diemen's Land. It was a shipping channel linking the Indian Ocean to the Pacific through the Tasman Sea, a useful shortcut for traders and raiders, pirates and ferrymen. The current swift. Two fishermen had been paid in advance to take Marr to the island. From there, he would catch a ship, the Elizabeth Thompson, the very vessel that delivered McManus to freedom a year earlier. Everything had to line up with precision. Communication was by signal flares, handkerchiefs, and shouts. If the timing was off, it would doom the escape. Marr had just one chance to catch the ship. The details had been worked out over months, which meant much could have been lost as the plan passed from hand to hand. Was the vessel to meet him Tuesday or Wednesday? Was it the south side of Waterhouse Island or the north? Would the captain wait if Marr didn't see him at first? And what about betrayal, as happened to Smith O'Brien on Maria Island? A setup? On late Monday afternoon, Marr reached Bass Strait at the mouth of the river that drained the northeast corner of Van Diemen's Land. He said farewell to his companions on land, thanked them for aiding his liberation attempt, and took up with two brothers for hire, the Barrett's fishermen with a small open boat they had built themselves. The craft did not look seaworthy. Waterhouse Island was about 2 miles offshore, flat topped and cliffy, a barren, treeless squat of land. To get there, the convict and the fisherman had to row along the coast for almost 40 miles and then cross the 2 miles through open water with the hard currents and chop of the strait, surf breaking over the bow. They paddled under the summer sun, fighting strong northwesterly winds that had trouble staying on course. The strait ran almost like a river between the ebb and flood stages of the tide. When the winds calmed, the water was clear enough to see dark images lurking just below the surface. The shadowing of sharks. Makos were the most common species, up to 10 feet in length, the fastest of all sharks. Flashes of gray in the shallow waters of the strait. Those fish the Barrett brothers could club away. What they feared were the great whites prowling these waters, 20 feet long or more, with a slashing maw of razor teeth. Yeah, because I don't know if makos are prone to attacking humans as much. The wind galloped. The sea rose. Marr was ordered to lie at the bottom of the boat as ballast. Waves of 2 feet, 4 feet, 6 feet, 15 feet, head down. Marr faced the faded canvas of the boat, wondered whether the pull of the sea would tear it wide open. Marr popped his head up to get a look. Any danger? Too late for that. The fishermen wrestled with the surf, leading their craft up to the crest of waves, then plummeting down the stern, buried in water before it reappeared. As the boat rode the bucking sea, the oars flailed in the air. When Marr popped up for another look, all he could see was foam and froth. The wind screamed for 2 hours. Marr was terrified. Finally, in late afternoon, the speck of Waterhouse Island came into view. It was not even a square mile in size, barely a bump of land sheared off at the top of ragged cliffs. They found a cove and beach and went ashore, dragging the scuffed up skiff to above the tide line. Mars saw no trace of human activity save the shell of a shipwreck decomposed by sun and surf. Exhausted, the men fell to the ground and rested till dark. A meal of smoked herring and biscuits, washed down with sherry, served as dinner revival. With pieces of the wreck, they made a fire. The carry-on of the ship was also scavenged for shelter. Scraps of sail were wrapped around the broken mast, making it a tent of sorts. On Tuesday morning, day 4 of the escape, Mars scanned the strait for his rescue ship. The news of his flight was out, and two Tasmanian newspapers were openly rooting for Mar against the crown. "Here's to every success and a continuation of freedom," wrote the editors of the Hobart Town Guardian. On this day, a feral dog, a black and tan Newfoundland, had found the sun-blasted crew on the beach. "Don't say anything to it," the fisherman warned. It was a ghost on 4 feet, an evil spirit haunting the island. But Mark took to the stray, soon to be his only mate. The day passed without anything to give him hope. The stray kicked up with the afternoon winds. Nothing appeared on the water. Wednesday, same thing. All day, squinting into the sun, looking for large sails, the white clouds of rescue, chatting with the fishermen brothers. On Thursday, they ran out of food. The Barretts had anticipated a trip of no more than 2 days and had taken just enough rations for that spell. They had no choice but to return to Van Diemen's Land and leave Mar alone on his pancake of sand. He understood they had all done all they could for him, in case anyone doubted their duty to the escape. Or if he were to die and they would be accused of foul play, he would vouch for them. Here he put it in writing. Mar crushed a tin drinking cup, flattening it completely, then blackened it over a fire. On this dark surface, he used the tip of a knife to write a primitive letter telling of his position, requesting provisions, and an explanation. The Barrett brothers had done their service for Ireland in the strait separating the Australian mainland for Van Diemen's Land. The fisherman rowed away. "I was alone on that morose island," Mar wrote. He was hungry, unable to forage much from the tiny wasteland of Waterhouse Island. Any food that would have to come from the sea at low tide, what could be chipped from rocks and cracked open. It was hard work, his hands bloodied, and for little protein. He followed the patterns of birds, their feeding habits, where they ended their days, where they delivered food. He found nests in the cliffs, climbed up, and reached for eggs. It was not enough. It meant a dangerous struggle with protective avian parents. He would starve to death if he couldn't find other sources of food, or he would die of thirst. He had enough water if rationed wisely for another week or so, but that was it. The island had no fresh water of its own. Mar would need to capture rainfall, but in summer it could be a long time before anything fell from the sky. At night, the biggest fear was what slithered along the ground, big, fully fanged black tiger snakes. Of all the Tasmanian exotics that frightened exiles in the penal colony, tiger snakes were the worst, at least by reputation. They crawled in the darkness, impossible to see, leaving a signature in the sand. Their venomous bite killed more humans than any other creature on land. Carnivores without discriminating taste. They attacked by flattening the body, lifting a swollen head up, and then springing on prey with a quick stab through the air. Venom from the bite caused instant numbness, followed by shortness of breath, gasping, and death. If Mark kept a large enough fire going, perhaps the heat would keep the tiger snakes away, but it would also attract the police on patrol offshore. On day 7 of the escape, Friday, Marr took up position under the unreliable shade of his ripped sail. He saw one passing ship far out in the strait. Joy, could this be the Elizabeth Thompson? He threw timbers of the shipwreck onto his smoldering blaze, stoking it to bonfire size as a signal. He jumped up and down, waving his coat, shouting, screaming into the strait, the wind grabbing his voice and tossing it away up toward the Tasman Sea. This went on for some time, but the ship did not appear any larger on the horizon. It shrank and then slipped away entirely. The next morning, a week and a day into his penal colony break, Mars spied a second ship. Again, he built his fire to a height that rose above the flat of the island. Again, he jumped and shouted and waved his coat like a flag. Here, here, over here. But this ship disappeared like the other one, northeast with the winds, in the direction of New Zealand, more than 1,200 miles away. Mar was left with his feral dog and the longing what it might be like to snuggle in bed with his bride tonight, to be cooking lamb chops with Egan, watching the last light on Lake Sorrel, a book to read, poems to write, songs to sing. Better to keep the mind on Bass Strait, on transport. It had all been arranged after all, half of it paid for in advance. And this captain was reliable. Yes, McManus had been delivered to a joyous throng in San Francisco. Imagine then what reception awaited Thomas Francis Marr on the other side of the Pacific, that ocean of no end, that leviathan of water. Another day broke with a heavy mist, visibly limited. Marr saw something emerge on the strait and built his signal fire, but it was not a full-sailed ship that took shape, not a mighty trading vessel. It was an 8-oared boat, low to the water, moving at a strong clip from the mainland to Mars Island hideaway. This could not be good. Marr entertained a dread thought. The police must have seen the fire. For all the talk about the code of honor among prisoners in Australia, the Irish convicts always felt they had a higher obligation to escape. The British Empire showed no honor in the forced removal of families from their homes, children taken for stealing bread, noblemen banished for speaking out, mothers plucked from their hearths after stealing some cloth to weave into a quilt. From the arrival of the first political prisoners, transported following the failed rebellion of 1798 to the present year of 1852, when nearly 1,000 Irish were freshly deposited in Van Diemen's Land. The true badge of distinction belonged to the person who could break from Britain's hold. Only a few ever made it, and fewer still among Mar's class, for the political prisoners were the rarest of escapees. Early on, all getaway attempts were futile. The bush was too harsh, the sea too forbidding, the distance from safety too far. But the land down under bred ingenuity in many ways among the convict class, especially. One man disguised himself as a kangaroo, hopping about in skins to get away from awful Port Arthur. He looked so convincing that a guard mistook him for the real thing and shot him for sport. Oh, God. Mary Bryant, sentenced to 7 years for stealing a silk bonnet, escaped from the mainland in the six-oared cutter of the provincial governor with her children and roustabout husband aboard. She knew nothing of the sea, but after packing rice, dried meats, charts, and a compass, and returning to shore several times for fish, turtles, and crab, the family navigated through the Great Barrier Reef and made it over 3,000 miles to Dutch Timor. Upon land, ha! Up, ha! Ha! Upon, ha! Upon land, ha! Upon land, ha! Landing, they announced themselves as castaways. A ruse that lasted until the husband, on a drunken binge, spilled the true tale of their identity and spectacular escape. The family was promptly shipped back to England and a new prison. Alexander Pierce, banished for stealing 6 pairs of shoes, also made his getaway by stolen boat, but he and 4 companions were not mariners. They washed ashore back on Tasmania and were soon starving. After drawing lots, they cannibalized the loser. Pierce, the lone survivor, was caught and hanged. By the time Marr found himself a wanted man, the penal system, driven by newfound political freedom in the colony, was nearing its final days. But what truly hastened the closure of the empire's largest gulag was gold. In April of 1851 came news of an enormous find of the world's most valuable commodity beneath the harsh, crusted wasteland of New South Wales. As with all such mother lodes that drive people to a frenzy, the stories spread with their stock of superlatives, many of them exaggerated. The gold field was said to be much larger than what drew the 49ers to the Sacramento River in California. More than 300 miles long, a single lump of gold weighed 75 pounds. With sudden wealth, newly rich men lit their pipes with pound notes. In a half-year's time, horse thieves moved from tented shacks to brig estates. 5 months after the discovery, in New South Wales, another big strike occurred in the state of Victoria. Now it was all the colony could do to keep its officers and bureaucrats, its guards and farmers from dropping everything and rushing off to the diggings. In 1852, the year of Mars' attempted escape, 100 million tons of gold were exported from Victoria, enough to sink a fleet of the Queen's ships. And in that same year, 300,000 immigrants came to the penal colony by choice. Gold made Australia more profitable as a free man's destination than a prisoner's hold. The next year, the last convicts arrived in Van Diemen's Land, including 1,000 Irish. 3 years after that, in an effort to shake a half century of notoriety, the island changed its name to Tasmania. Transportation was over for all but the far western coast of Australia, north of Perth. And while the end of the convict ships did not mean that those who were under sentence were paroled or given more liberties, it took away whatever justification remained for the British Empire to discard its undesirables. 14,000 miles from home, in the cove where Marr had made his camp, the swift-moving rowboat came ashore. Several men charged from the vessel and came face to face with the sun-ravaged Irishman. One man had lost half his nose, another had lost an ear, a third looked at Marr through a single eye, the other closed and scarred. A fourth man was missing half his fingers, and the fifth man had but a single front tooth. He smiled at Marr. They did not look like representatives of the long arm of the crown. They were scruffy, unshaven, their clothes soiled, foul-mouthed and foul-smelling. But then Marr didn't look like a Waterford gentleman. He too was scruffy, unshaven, his clothes soiled, and hungry. He'd been kept alive by a diet of fern roots, small fish, and eggs from the cliff's nests. The escapee explained that he was a gold prospector, a prospector. Well, who wasn't? All of Australia was fortune grand, after all, needing only to be scratched. Marr's cover story defied credulity. It was preposterous to think that gold could come out of the wind tousled sand cake of Waterhouse Island. He said no more. The strangers set up a large tent of their own, picked away at the shipwreck, and by nightfall had a roaring fire. They hauled out food, enough provisions to tide them over for weeks. Crab, onions, dried lamb meat, biscuits, as well as alcohol and tobacco. A seafood stew was concocted over the fire in a large pot. The exile was invited to join them. Ravenous, he fell on the feast. The men told their story. They were convicts, just escaped from Hobart, stealing a boat and racing up the eastern shore of the island to get to Bass Strait, a trip of nearly 500 miles. Hurrah! And they too were prospectors of a sort, crossing Bass Strait on the way to Port Phillip in Victoria. on the southern coast of Australia, where another big gold strike had just been announced. In the ground scraping rush for nuggets, no man had a past. All were equal in the chase. Marr considered these escapees pirates, as he called them, and found their company delightful, not only for the food and conversation, but for the sprightly optimism of the newly sprung. In his first days of freedom, Marr had felt the same way. The pirates stayed on the island for several days. Marr promised to repay them for all they had given them. I had the best and most of everything. Marr wrote, the snuggest corner of the tent, the rarest morsels of the daily stew, the choicest pipe full of tobacco. What he couldn't hide was his true intentions, for no prospector spent the day staring at the sea. Marr told the truth. Yes, he was looking for something other than gold, a way out of England's human dump. It solidified their bond. All had done a bolt. After 10 days on Waterhouse Island, Mars spied yet another object floating on the blue horizon, though it was somewhat difficult to make it out in the usual morning mist. This one did get closer and bigger and assumed the shape he'd been longing for, a large sailing ship. It got near enough to shore that Mark could discern a flag fluttering from the mizzen, the stars of the Australian League from the deck. A signal gun was fired, startling Marr, followed by a second blast, then a third. A man could be seen waving a white flag on board. The Elizabeth Thompson had arrived. Marr jumped up and down, yelled with joy, rolled up his bundle of filthy possessions, and waited for his deliverance. But with the wind and current, the sails were unstable and white capped. The ship, even after shortening her sails, could come no closer. Marr would swim if he had to. The pirates offered to row him out to his liberators through the high, rough chop. They rode the waves, rolling and dipping, out to greet the big vessel. Swamped several times, sharks starting to circle. As they tied up to the Thompson, Marr turned to his fellow escapees. I emptied my pocket of all the money in it, and handing it down to the leader of the gang, bade them farewell forever. On the quarter deck, Marr met Captain Betts, a short, well-fed, convivial man with enough wits and a stockpile of stories to match Marr's tales. They were carrying wool from down under to England by way of South America. The crew seemed more than happy to have a lively new passenger. Marr kept his identity secret to everyone but the captain. He was not a political prisoner on the run, but a paying traveler with an unusual way of embarking. He could not risk a leak, but she had to follow the Empire's rules. To his delight, he found that Captain Betts could quote poetry at length, Byron in particular. The ship sailed northeast through Bass Strait into the Tasman Sea out to the open Pacific to cross the Earth in the southern hemisphere. In the days that followed, Governor Denison was removed by his English superiors and sent to a new post. He was bitter to the end at the collapse and liberation of his kingdom of felons. Another 10,000 convicts would be sent to the western shore of Australia, but that was it for the experiment of trying to make a cage of a continent. The last ship of captives from Great Britain arrived in Australia in 1868, just a few years after Abraham Lincoln freed 4 million slaves in the United States. Breezing through the warm waters of the South Pacific, looking back in the direction of young Ireland's banishment, Marr was a prisoner no more. Now he was a fugitive, soon one of the world's best known. His calling would be to translate a history of famine and oppression, exile and humiliation into a life of possibility in a country founded on the opposite principles of the penal colony. All right, so that is the end of chapter 8, but also part 2. So we begin part 3 tomorrow. To be Irish in America. Um, and chapter 9. I wonder if he gets back with his wife, meets her in America. I mean, wasn't she pregnant, or did they already have a child? Because be interesting to see what happens there. Mm. Hey guys. Sorry, I'm like the Benadryl, I think it's got me spit slow, but um I'll try to perk up in my self-esteem. I'm working on it. Tomorrow, I'll see if I'll be on this channel or not. Like on Friday, I was on the other channel. And we'll see if I'm itchy and this is too much clothes, you know? um, anyway, I'll have to find something to eat and get some rest. But I love you so much. Um, I believe The Last of Us is on tonight. I should try to watch it tonight so I can watch reviews. But um, see what I mean? All right. You sleep well. I love you.